it going?
It is okay, my man. This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon where I'm at on October 10th, 2018. So, shall I just call you Jordan? Shall I call you Cave Light, Mr. Cave Light?
What's your name, just to make sure
My first name is pronounced Isel, but as you can imagine, living for so many years in places like Cambodia and what have you, you get real open-minded about how people should pronounce your name. So I've had different nicknames where I lived all over the world, and so in Chinese I'm Daing, and in Laotian I was Aison, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Do you have a philosophy background? What you study in undergrad? Or
I do. Well, my the major I finished with was political science, but basically was political philosophy that I was doing. And in a lot of ways, already coming out of high school, what I was really doing, and the opportunity for me in university was studying philosophy. But the question was sort of in what department was I going to do that? And there were a lot of struggles. Initially, what I wanted to do was a major in economics, which I thought of as the philosophy of poverty. But I got there, it was a bunch of alcoholics trying to get rich. What was going on in the Department of Economics was not what I was looking for.
And the smartest economist is still kind of guessing.
Yeah. No, it's just, the nature of the courses and the nature of the people studying. That was a big letdown to me. So I ended up in political science. But yeah, in terms of what I was actually reading on my own time and what I was learning, because most of what I learned at university was very much despite what was being taught in class and not because of it. It was very much philosophy. And, I exhausted my interest in European philosophy and then moved on to Asian philosophy right at the end of my BA, Buddhist philosophy. And, I was working on Buddhist philosophy for about 10 years. Learned Pali, lived in Asia. Pali is the ancient scriptural language of the religion. Did a lot of work on that. And now, partly just because I date younger women, my girlfriend is 25. And just in terms of the last couple months in the last year, she was really asking me where she should start with or possibly even finish with philosophy. So we've actually done quite a robust kind of reading course where we both went back to the ancient Greeks. So for her, that was her first time reading big names like Aristotle and Socrates, Thucydides and what have you. And for me, it was my second or third time reading those books. But some of them, like right now, I'm still reading Aristotle's Politics. It's a very long thorough reading. Yeah. But reading it, I haven't read it since I was 19 or something. But the last time I read it, I was 19, so it's almost like reading it for the first time because I'm such a long time. But yeah, so looking again at those books. That's what I'm doing just lately in philosophy, yeah. And yourself? Did you come out of a straight filmmaking background or what? I mean, some people did.
I studied philosophy, but when I was about 20 years ago, I wanted to have the most practical job that I thought could have the biggest impact. And I thought sort of entertainment using sort of this a massive, amazing tool like television, sort of before the internet was big, this tool for good and not evil would be ideal. But the problem is, it's like getting people to eat their spinach. You got to entertain them,
right?
Eat it. So that's kind of like trying to do some interesting video, whether it's documentaries. I did a lot of stuff for TV over the years and saw that getting through the gatekeepers to do really good work, even at Discovery Channel, was difficult.
Yeah.
So I just went out on my own to do more documentary work. But the problem there is the amount of work to do something really good. The payoff isn't great because the amount of viewers that are seeing it, unless it's a massive documentary, which is really difficult to have.
Right.
It's the return on investment just in sweat equity is not great.
Yeah.
So, turning towards the internet and shorter videos, viral videos, whatever, if you can, the amount of videos, short videos that I've done that have been seen by a couple million people versus the 5 documentary I did probably saw by 10,000 people. So it's like trying to figure out now, in 2018, looking forward, what's the best way to really reach people to engage them.
Right. Well, look, my perspective is a little strange. Filmmaking both is and isn't part of my life. I've made over 1,000 videos on YouTube, but I do not think of that as filmmaking most of the time. But just about two or 3 days ago, there's a website I'm a part of, which is mostly people who are, put it this way, it's people who are already bored of veganism. They're not new vegans. They're people who've been in the scene for a long time, and they were asking for suggestions for debate topics, within this group. And this is my honest suggestion. I said, what I'd really like to see you debate is, how are we going to make a Netflix TV series? And I say, I'm thinking of a Netflix TV series that's not about veganism, but, something that competes with Walt Disney and the kids shows that are on there already. A lot of which are really bad. I know, what's a good SpongeBob competes with SpongeBob SquarePants or something. And where it's not about veganism, but where it's really getting across the important moral messages of our time. Kids shows always have. I mean, Sesame Street has always had a moral message.
That was probably about a year ago, about that massive pig.
Right? Oakja, are you thinking of the right? Yeah.
And I feel like that had some impact, but
sure,
it's a drop in the bucket.
Right.
And that's why I'm trying to figure out, for example, I've been vegetarian for 20 years, vegan for about a year.
Great.
Just as a practical, to me, it wasn't even. Once you really look at it directly, there's no other real option.
Yeah.
You can't really move forward once you look at it. So to me, it's like I'm not any more ethical than anyone else. I'm relatively evolved. I'm relatively educated. To me, it wasn't that I was any better or worse than anyone else.
If you think you're really not more ethical than anyone else, you haven't hung out with the right people yet. There are some people on this earth who will really make you feel, will really let you know. Go on, yeah.
But the question is, my other, in my sort of, coastal elite liberal circles, with these evolved, educated people, and they're all eating meat. So what is it?
Yeah.
That's, if I were to do a poll, I'm curious to them. It's like, what would make it click?
Right.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. What is the, weird way in, the out-of-the-box way in, to get it to be like, oh, my money is going to purchase, on some level, the torture of animals.
Right.
Maybe it's the environment, or whatever it might be, that you have this clear body of evidence that is almost undeniable. So how do you really package that in a way that's entertaining, interesting, personal story of striving, or whatever, the classical hero story, whatever that might be. Like, what is that? And what's, if you were to make a film right now, what would it be? Because, I'm not well-versed in the vegan community. I'm just really starting to, know all these players, and that's what really drew me to you, is when I was who is Wayne? Who are these people?
Oh, good. Well, you're starting at the deep end of the swimming pool. That's a good way to start, is my channel. So you're not disillusioned later with who is Wayne Seong or who is Earthling Ed. That's good. Start. Most people discover my criticism of these figures after years and sometimes thousands of dollars invested in
the end have to be the same.
Right. But look, I have a 5-year-old daughter. So for me, one project I started to get rolling was writing a children's storybook. And again, I assume you haven't seen it, but I can send you the link.
Okay. Thing of you reading it or something.
Right. So reading it only takes 3 minutes or something. I mean, it's a picture book. There's not a lot of text there. I mean, some of that, again, it's not. I mean, it is vegan propaganda, but it's not a pamphlet. And I mean, I know so many vegan parents, and again, from different backgrounds. There's really a terrible paucity. I have seen the books that are already out there, and they're pretty lousy in a bunch of different ways. And it's very easy to write things that are preachy or like a pamphlet. And, this is not what we're talking about. So in terms of filmmaking and cultural production, one side of it is exactly what I've already mentioned. Something to compete with SpongeBob SquarePants, something to compete with Sesame Street, something to compete with Curious George in terms of storybooks. But even if I were making something for adults, I would probably be looking at something to compete with Game of Thrones or something to compete with Star Wars. I don't think I'd be looking at all to reproduce what documentary films have already done. Really, really broadly speaking, I think the impact that vegan documentary films could have hit their pinnacle when Oprah Winfrey first covered veganism. So to my memory, I believe that was 2012. You could Google it. Maybe I'm slightly off.
Right.
But I just went about 2012, and of course at that time YouTube was really growing very rapidly. For many, many people, that was the first time they'd ever seen slaughterhouse footage. It was the first time they'd asked themselves tough questions about where does meat come from, where does milk come, these kinds of questions. And, there's sort of the shock of, oh my God, they actually, insert their fist up the cow's anus while impregnating them on these dairy farms. All that was new and shocking, and it got on Oprah Winfrey's TV show at a time when Oprah Winfrey was the most powerful figure in American mainstream media. But that is now over, and we're now into a much longer period of time, much longer stage of the game, when veganism is not any more exciting or interesting than campaigns to get people to quit smoking. So, I mean, it's a powerful comparison and one that's not that easy to sit with. So you were mentioning before that you know people who you consider to be creative and politically astute people, but they continue eating meat. You may well know people who continue smoking cigarettes, likewise, who are ethical in other parts of their lives.
They would say,
right.
I know for sure this is
right.
bad, but
right.
I love it. I'd rather have that argument.
Right, that's right.
I know what's happening, but I just don't care because it tastes so good.
Right.
At least we can then, now we have a legitimate plane to start a debate. But I don't think even people are there yet.
Oh, but I think that's the end of the debate. I think that's the problem. I mean, the ultimate answer to veganism, like the answer to you should quit smoking, is I don't care. And that's ultimately what you're up against, right? And the same.
Is I don't care about myself.
Right. That's right.
With veganism, you could say.
Right.
You are literally torturing this animal.
Yes, right.
That's
right.
What you are doing,
right?
And they'd be like,
and they don't care. That's what you're up against.
Right.
So
that's the other
right. But I'm not even being devil's advocate here. I'm just stating that in terms of the position we're in, because your question was about filmmaking and what can filmmaking do now. Well, the answer was very different in the year 1992. I mean, in the year 1992, it's like, okay, we have this story, we have these fundamental facts about where meat comes from, where milk comes from, maybe where fur comes from some extent. We have this explosive documentary footage and this story to tell, and nobody knows it yet. That's comparable to the stage, I would say, right around the end of World War II. Almost nobody knew that cigarette smoking was really bad for you. So some people knew, some scientists, some health research. There were some people who knew that cigarette smoking was bad for you. But within the United States of America, it was a mainstream view that smoking cigarettes was healthy for you. That, like, track athletes would run better if they smoked cigarettes. These were widespread beliefs in, like, the 1930s. Completely ridiculous, of course. But then after World War II, again, for a documentary filmmaker, you'd say, look, we have this story to tell. Cigarettes, they're actually poison. They're actually bad in various ways. And I think there are questions of ethical responsibility and so on, too, in terms of smoking cigarettes. But regardless, that was new and shocking, let's say 1945 up to 1960 or 1959 or thereabouts, But then, by the 1980s, it's old. Everybody already knows cigarettes are bad for you. Put it this way. Everybody already knows that in a perfect world, there would be no cigarettes, one way or another. Whether or not you personally have to go through the withdrawal symptoms of quitting in this vague perfect world scenario. So in the same way, we're now coming into a much longer period of struggle where more and more people will be aware of, yeah, you know what, in a perfect world, cow milk wouldn't be produced by having this cow stand in a shed and be, anally probed and go through this horrible existence. Right. But it's not shocking. It's not new. What happened with Oprah Winfrey promoting veganism for a month, it's never going to happen again. Lightning doesn't strike twice. It's old news. It's become part of the constant background noise of Western civilization and culture. So the nature of the struggle and challenge ahead of us, including as filmmakers, myself being a zero-budget filmmaker on YouTube, to some extent what I am doing is making films, but I'm not going for that shock reaction. And in a sense, I'm also really not that interested in telling people something they don't already know. So I would say this is just within that. I think it's quite correct to call it entertainment. I made, just in response to your email, I made a really simple note on one piece of paper here that one of the things I wanted to say to you is that I see it as kind of a 4-part challenge, and one of the 4 parts is entertainment. So there's activism, and activism narrowly defined, because of the other three parts here. Activism, there's an academic side to the debate, there's an entertainment side, and then there's the food industry side of what's going on in veganism. The food industry being, companies actually producing vegan meat or soy milk and this kind of
Memphis meats and
right.
Yeah.
This side of the challenge. But the entertainment side, I use the word entertainment because I don't really see that as being there's this shocking news. Do you know where cow milk comes from? That was the case, I think, as recently as the 1990s. People really didn't know, and people didn't know what a slaughterhouse looked like and so on. And now they do. And again, the creative challenge. Look, George R. R. Martin, in his book series, A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, there's a list of political themes he wants to meditate on, a lot of them going back to his own youth during the Vietnam War. I mean, he's still messed up about what happened with the Vietnam War and consequences of this and so on. Which fine, so that's not a criticism. But my point is,
look up when you said the name. Who were you talking about?
Sorry, so the author of Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, George R. R. Martin. So he's a best-selling author. But yeah, I just say, but what he produced wasn't a documentary about democracy or the Vietnam War or something. He created a form of entertainment and fiction that that brought these themes to a mass audience. Now again, it is different with children, but I think probably for filmmakers, whether you're talking about an adult audience or a children's audience, the next step for veganism, I think, is going to be a step in that direction where we really do look at entertainment as entertainment. I mean, very obviously, something like science fiction can embody and address these ethical problems. More easily than fiction set in medieval times could, or what have you. Right. But yeah, I think that's going to be the road ahead, and not trying to recapture the excitement, of say 2012. I know it's recent history, but for me, I think lightning doesn't strike twice. We don't get that. We're not going to get that impetus again.
Right. No, that makes sense. I was also just trying to figure out, I don't know these guys well, but for example. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Wayne Xiong,
right?
Yeah,
right.
I mean, in an ideal world, there is let's say I got to know him, got access to him, and followed him on the ups and downs, good person, bad person, who he is,
right.
Giants game, getting tackled, to whatever, make it a personal story that it doesn't matter. The veganism is just the device, but it's really about a personal struggle to accomplish something, and it's dealing with legal issues and where capitalism and socialism meet, or whatever the different factors, regulation versus deregulation, what are all the things that are big discussion points in our culture, but through a personal journey. And whether it's him, is there another person that I don't know about, or is there a sting operation that's 10 years in the making of the most intense undercover videos that will be seen, will hopefully come out in the next couple of years, that will blow, obviously we've seen
right
terrible footage, but something that's still newsworthy, that's on the cusp of happening, in that you might have your pulse on, that maybe most people in the even knowledge people don't know.
So that's I think that's the fundamental thing I'm challenging you on. I think Wayne Xiong is very much hung up on that. But I mean, after a certain point, the fact that cigarettes give you cancer is not newsworthy. The fact that a particular movie star even has died of lung cancer is barely newsworthy. And it was shocking when those things were first being realized by the American public. But it's not shocking anymore. It's never going to be shocking anymore. In the same way, I mean, where do fur coats come from? How could we possibly have footage that's more horrifying and more graphic than what's already out there? I mean, it really is. I mean, by the way, I'm not being sarcastic. Every so often I have to edit that kind of footage, and it's amazing to me that it still can upset me or disgust me, editing footage of that, because, I my own small part as a filmmaker.
I was just watching a bunch of baby chickens go into an incinerator.
Right, right. So I just say I'm not scoffing at the impact that has on people, including the impact it has on me when I work with it. But I think in a sense we got a bit of a free ride because of that shock factor that supported our cause. And then once you're past that shock factor, there's a much greater creative challenge there. Now someone like Wayne Young. So I mean, what if instead we took so that's someone from the activist side. You could have someone from the academic side. You could have a university professor who does animal rights and veganism. There are a few examples. You could have someone from the food industry side. You could have one of these, businessmen who's, promoting vegan food and vegan cuisine. I know a couple examples. You could follow any of those people. But I think exactly what you have to let go of is the thought that there's something there that's going to make headlines, as you're saying, or that there's going to be an investigation. There's going to be a film clip of what really happens on the farm. So once that's gone, what's the story?
Or interesting or weird, that's maybe humorous. That may be a way.
Sure, and as I say, I mean, whether we think of it in terms of science fiction or children's storybooks or any of this stuff, I think there are a lot of people who want to get across these kinds of messages.
Right. I do like the idea of doing like a Black Mirror sort of thing that is science fiction-y.
Sure.
I do like that idea. That is fully scripted. I think there is something there.
Right.
And that's something that I may pursue. But in the meantime, I'm also looking whether it's a set of short videos that's like a series, whether it's potentially animated, like we talked about, but is rooted in facts. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, obviously it's up to you, but I mean, what are the facts you want to get across, and who is the audience for them? I mean, it's very saddening to me that all the time I deal with these provinces of knowledge, whether they're political or what have you. Look, okay, I'll give you the simplest example. When I was in Toronto, Canada, I was interested in a lot of different political and ecological issues and ethical issues, but many of them didn't touch people's lives directly. So, whether you're interested in slavery or the history of Cambodia or something like veganism, that can all seem a bit distant. But then I started doing political campaigning on water pollution. And this very directly included the water people were drinking out of their own taps. Right. So water pollution, Toronto is on a lake. It's not a river. So this is pollution going into the lake and then coming directly into your tap, and then you're drinking it, and bathing in it, and so on directly. And, I was aware with something like air pollution, that can be a bit abstract. Well, there's this cloud in the sky and it kind of goes away. And this, this was so visceral. It's like, great, I'm really going to get a reaction out of the public with this. Right. And no, you don't. No. What you get to witness is the extent to which people don't care. They really, sincerely, genuinely don't care. So whether it's something like that or, I mean, I'm in Cambodia. I'm at a place where mass murder and torture took place. And I'm talking to someone face to face about the CIA's role in this and what America's role is, and people don't care. So, I just say, look, I mean, I sympathize, but it's easy to go through life looking for that reaction or trying to generate that kind of reaction through drama, whether it's through authorship, through research in a textual basis, or through filmmaking. But I think, especially with veganism, it's misguided. I think. Art and artifice, I think, has to kind of take you in a different direction that way. Shock value is easy. It's easy to shock people. But I mean, look at still today. I mean, this is still a part of my life. So many people still support communism. Tomorrow, I'm going up to the university campus, and there's a professor there. The professor I'll be seeing, she still supports communism. She was encouraging her students to memorize the lyrics to the Internationale, which is the communist anthem, basically. And I've written essays myself with really shocking vignettes of mass murder and torture and starvation and kind of the worst elements of communism. And people are able to shake that off and ignore that and say, well, they don't care. So I mean, given this capacity in human nature, it's not surprising to me what people's attitude is towards meat and cigarettes and even alcohol, whiskey, and all these other things. Yeah. So I'm trying to be sympathetic, but I mean, that's kind of the warning I feel like I'm sharing.
Throw out this massive wide net and want to talk to everybody, really, because I want to be as, not necessarily. I want to be just debunk everything I think I may know,
right?
Or what all the different avenues. Really,
well, you're talking to the right guy.
I mean, that's what's interesting. Is when people don't lie to themselves.
Yeah.
So the question is, why don't people care? Why are they lying to themselves? I mean, there is a philosophical, massive mosaic there that can be looked into, but
right.
More of a may not be as sort of sexy necessarily, but it is that is the question.
Right. But wasn't there I'm sorry, but I've seen several. Okay, look, coming back to this basic premise that we can never go back to the year 2012, I think you will doubtless remember Cowspiracy that came out.
Yeah,
but I think just a few months ago, Natalie Portman came out with another film of the same type. And again, we're way past the point of diminishing returns. And I can't say nobody cared about Natalie Portman's film. It didn't have zero impact on planet Earth.
It didn't have a big splash.
Right. But my point is, lightning doesn't strike twice. I don't think that's happening again.
I don't know. It depends on the marketing campaign, but I think when the Game Changers, the guy who did James Cameron, who did directed the movie with the green people,
right?
Avatar,
right, and Titanic and so on, right?
So he's doing this big documentary about runners, weightlifters, like the best of the best athletes who are all vegan, and it's called The Game Changers.
Yeah.
It's sort of the trailer has been out for a year now, but they're supposed to. I do think that at least will have someone be like, oh,
right.
if this National Football League players and look at this guy, massive athlete, doesn't eat meat, maybe I'll rethink it.
Right.
It gets them to see it just slightly out of the box.
Well,
Those kinds of stories I'm looking for.
I agree with you, and I disagree with you to some extent, because here's the thing. What I've always said about the health argument in veganism is that the crucial thing we just have to get across is that being vegan is possible. Because a lot of people genuinely think it's impossible. I see that in Asia. I see that in the West. Like, they actually think you need meat to live or you need dairy to live. So once you've got across that it's possible, yes, generally speaking, of course, being vegan is actually healthier than eating meat. But to me, that's really a secondary question. The first question is, can you be vegan? Can you sustain health and life on a vegan diet? The answer is yes. Now, are you actually going to be healthier than someone who's on a very disciplined pescatarian diet? If you eat all junk food as a vegan, and it's theoretically possible. There's caveats to put in here. So, but I leave that aside as a separate question. Here's the problem: those athletes you're talking about, do they smoke cigarettes or no? No.
They probably smoke weed, but
nobody cares that athletes don't smoke cigarettes. It's not galvanizing or driving the anti-smoking movement. The fact that these athletes don't smoke cigarettes. Again, can we put together a documentary about how all the best Olympic athletes refuse to drink alcohol? Like, I'm not saying all of them, but probably a very large percentage of people who are high-level athletes refuse to drink alcohol. What is the impact of that on the culture of drinking alcohol? Almost zero. So,
right.
Again, I'm saying this to challenge you. I'm not saying that has zero significance. Sure, there are all kinds of celebrities, like beautiful women and male weightlifting athletes, who look good and eat a vegan diet. But guess what? On the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine, every month, there's someone else who eats meat and drinks alcohol and smokes cigarettes and may smoke marijuana or do other drugs, who also is beautiful, either as a model or actor or weightlifter or athlete or what have you. And I don't think that has this galvanizing, highly impactful effect for a sobriety movement, nor for an anti-smoking movement, nor can we really expect that for the vegan movement. So just put in the caveat here, when I offer these criticisms, I'm never claiming that there's zero efficacy. That's not, Even like the most ineffective forms of activism. Like if I just stand on the sidewalk and hand out pamphlets saying stop eating meat.
It's like throwing a pebble in a lake, it'll have some...
Right.
Yeah.
And, when you hand out pamphlets, it's always also people who already have something going on in their head. There's someone who was already 9/10 of the way there, and you happen to give them that. It's where you can only take credit for having a small impact. No, you're gonna have some impact. But again, I really think it's misleading. I really think it's misleading to hope. Right. I wouldn't expect a big impact. I wouldn't expect that to change headlines or change the culture. The basic fact that many successful athletes eat a vegan diet. So what? Many successful athletes are completely sober and refuse to drink alcohol and refuse to smoke. Yeah.
Beyond the advocacy
or
the activism, what do you think is interesting that's happening whether it's visual or not, that's happening in the vegan world? Even if it's inside baseball, two vegans, what is the most interesting thing that's happening that you're seeing that you're like, oh, this I want to know more about?
It all rests on donor support. This is the brutal reality that most people in an interview will not tell you. So if you say what's interesting or what's exciting or what am I hopeful about for the future, I can only be hopeful about things that are going to have 65-year-olds donating money to support them, which is, again, another reason for me not to be wildly optimistic about athletes or, sexy people in bathing suits, which, has its role in the movement. It's fine. I don't hate on it so much. When I look at an organization like PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the question I have to ask is, can we have 2, 3 many PCRMs? Can we have 10 or 20? And can these sorts of institutions or initiatives, can they develop the kind of self-evident legitimacy that gets them donor support, which is predominantly going to be from wealthy people over 65 years old? So then this may seem very bleak, but that really is my hope in terms of what can happen right now. Is there a lot already going on that I'm hopeful about? No, I'm not. And the framework of what we've already said says why. Like, am I hopeful that Paul Bashir, standing around with people wearing masks on the street, am I hopeful that can now go up to the next level and have some kind of bigger and better impact? No, not at all. Not at all. And no, I'm not hopeful about direct action everywhere and so on. I think a lot of those things have already kind of hit their peak or hit their limit. And these are, these are for related reasons. But there is the real prospect of doing what PCRM has done in terms of lawsuits, challenging things that are illegal or unhealthy that are going on. Well, okay, sorry, when I say illegal, I need to just flesh that a little bit. Is it legal to have schools teaching school children that eating 2 eggs a day is healthy for them, chicken eggs? It may or may not be legal, but it's probably something you can challenge at City Hall or in court through various forms of public redress. Whether or not it's legal in a particular jurisdiction may stand to be debated. But in many jurisdictions, it's not legal for Coca-Cola to come in and tell school children, hey kids, it's okay to drink, or it's good to drink a can of Coke every day.
Right.
So, or of course not the cigarette industry, it's unthinkable. So there's a matter of principle there. And again, the organization that can do that, another one I like to point out is the problem of chromium hexane with leather. So this is a toxic pollutant issue. But, whether you can get the wedge in on demanding labeling, where you say, hey, look, can we have labels saying what this really is and what the consequences are? Whether those are because you can label things for ecological consequences as well as health consequences and what have you. Whether it's at that end or whether it's, again, challenging the school boards and challenging these kinds of things about what they're doing. The potential for that to create a plurality of respectable organizations like PCRM, that's about the only thing I can really be positive about right now. Sorry, I'm looking at my own little note, my one note here about the 4 sides of the equation. The activist side, you said other than the activist side, the academic side, the entertainment side, and then the food industry side. There's nothing happening on the academic side, nothing. So if you want hope, I mean, it's got to go up from here. It's got to get better than where it is right now. Have you? I mean, you know, again, I know you haven't been in the game that long, but I don't think you hear about people like, oh wow, did you hear about this great research that was done as part of someone's PhD thesis on veganism or somehow related to veganism? Given that there's an enormous amount of department resources going into feminist research, academic feminism, academic human rights discourse, a lot of academic political discourses that don't necessarily lead anywhere or change the world. There's obviously the potential for veganism to start making a difference in the world via academic institutions, and that hasn't happened at all yet. So I am extremely cynical about academic institutions, but I think you can say even if you're just starting from zero and getting up to the same level, that should be happening now in the next 10 years. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I guess on the academic thing, I would say on the environmental side, I am seeing slightly more mainstream articles about the impact of meat that you haven't really seen.
Yes. Yeah.
If there's something there. Because I feel like there are these super devout, liberal environmentalists who eat tons of meat. So, like,
yep.
At some point, it's got to click for them to be like, oh, wait.
Yep. Yeah, Canada, we founded Greenpeace. It's a Canadian organization originally. And the founders of Greenpeace, every single one of them ate meat, smoked cigarettes, and drank alcohol. And a lot of them used to work on fishing boats. They'd worked in the fishing industry. They're from East Coast of Canada. And I met a couple of those guys. There's one I really remember meeting and speaking to, but I think some of the others, because I was involved in ecology, admittedly before I was vegan, but I was already strictly vegetarian back then. I was vegetarian and I refused to buy leather. And I was kind of vegan in principle, but I really barely heard the word vegan back then. But anyway, I was strictly vegetarian. And it blew my mind back then. I mean, how can you front for this cause without being involved in veganism? So you're right, but I mean, what you'd be describing there is the potential of veganism to co-opt things that are already going on in ecology. And then the question you have to ask yourself is there anything really hopeful and positive enough going on in ecology that veganism co-opting it is going to be a very positive, big deal, is going to make a big difference? Maybe, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's kind of why I go back to the entertainment thing. Is there
right?
I do agree with you. I like the idea of doing something that is scripted.
Yeah.
I think there is something there, whether it's a cartoon for kids and whether it's sci-fi, whether something that challenges, but that intrigues people for the story alone.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, why do people care so much about Star Wars, or why did they care in the past? I mean, it's a story about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, big, mythological-sized themes and conflicts. Something like the extraordinary success of Game of Thrones, both the books and the TV show. Again, there are very fundamental themes of honor and duty and self-sacrifice, and it does get into what is feudalism and what is democracy eventually. But this is like more than 3,000 pages into the text. I mean, there are real questions people find very compelling. Being played with. And a lot of this stuff, I mean, especially if you're looking at Batman and Spider-Man, a lot of it is kind of simultaneously adult entertainment and children's entertainment, which is also, it's a curious feature of Western civilization now. That, we tend to make this kind of children's entertainment, but it's actually so dark and violent in its themes that it's only appropriate for an adult audience. This is, I'd say most of the Batman movies and that kind of thing is like that. But, I just point out there's a hunger for entertainment with real substance and dealing with those kinds of themes. And any or all of those themes. I mean, it's very easy for me to imagine that someone who's just cognizant of veganism and ecology, I mean, you could throw in a few others, but veganism and animal rights and ecology could start producing fiction, out of that background. It happened once in a really weird way with the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer. A bunch of people, mostly authors at that time, this is really before cinema, but authors and playwrights, made a lot of works that featured the question of cruelty to animals and animal rights based directly on Schopenhauer's influence and Schopenhauer's theory of art and compassion. Schopenhauer put forward the general idea that sympathy or compassion is the basis of all ethics. And this was shown in whether or not you felt compassion for an animal, even when you were killing it for meat yourself, and so on. So that's a couple hundred years ago. There have been other kind of ideas like that played out in the arts. But yeah, I think it's fair to say in that theater, veganism hasn't yet had its turn at bat. It's not yet. It's not yet boring, and I think that's kind of the challenge you have to play when you represent a cause or a problem that everyone already knows about. It would be very. What if I asked you this question? This would be really, really hard. What if you wanted to make a film now in 2018, trying to get the message across that the war in Afghanistan has to end? It's very hard because everybody already knows and nobody cares. Everybody already knows about Afghanistan. Now, go back to the year 2004 or something. Okay. This is the shock value is there, and do you realize what we're doing in Afghanistan? There's going to be this sense of Sturm and Drang built into it. But now today, the same ethical issues are really, really hard to broach in fiction or in documentary. So no, I mean, it's that kind of transition, that kind of maturity or maturation of the cause that we have to prepare ourselves for. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. So with the last of your four, which is a good rounding out point, is the food industry.
Yeah.
And this, may be our final hope, if you will. Like in 2 to 10 years, when they really perfect this, and we can get over the hurdles of that it's weird or that that it's safe, whatever it is. This is real meat in a lab that tastes good without all the problems surrounding it.
Right.
And that might get people to be like, oh well, if they are the exact same and one doesn't do this and one does. Right. Is that our way out?
Right. I mean,
I don't know. And is there things that are happening in that part of the industry that you're looking at, or that you like one company better than I guess the guy who does Memphis Meats is pretty outspoken. Seems interesting. Are there other people like that you're looking at?
Well, my hope for that is limited because of my experience with Buddhism in Asia. What you say is true. I mean, there's this fundamental issue of making veganism easy. That's what those industries are accomplishing. But, I've lived in Taiwan, and Taiwan is still to this day the most advanced nation in the world that way because of the basis of Buddhism and Taoism. But what I found in Taiwan was that the easier you make veganism, the more the common run of man regards it with a kind of contempt. Doing what's easy isn't what's respected or, what's regarded as austere or impressive or an accomplishment. If climbing a mountain is easy and anybody can do it, then so what? It's just something you happen to do that weekend. And I saw and felt a lot of that in Taiwan, and where I'd meet people who were in vegan restaurants, but they were meat eaters. They just happened to be going to a vegan restaurant. They regarded it as one style of food out of many that they sometimes ate. The same way you might sometimes go to a Vietnamese restaurant or a Thai restaurant. Right. It's just another form of food in the market. And you really got the sense. I mean, a couple times people said to me, after chatting with me for a while, they found me quite intelligent narrative. They said, but you can't possibly be vegan. Because their assumption really was that vegans were these superstitious people who believed in ghosts and were doing things to avoid getting bad karma and so on. They had this really low opinion of vegans, even as the food becomes easier to get and easier to enjoy as the lifestyle. So I just say, facilitating something at the same time makes it facile, makes it easy, puts it in a position of contempt. Whereas, just a couple of years ago when I told people, I was vegan, whether it was said I was vegan in Saskatchewan or vegan in, even when I was in Kunming, that I was vegan in China, in Yunnan, and people would really say, oh, wow, like that must have been hard. Like, how did you do it? How did you manage this? Didn't you have problems with this or that? Well, and there is this kind of grudging respect for it just because it's something hard to do. So it's a double-edged sword. But I mean, there's definitely the possibility that veganism becoming an industry, having this support, I hope that's going to create, Ultimately, this all relies on donations. Filmmaking, there's some income. There's some, some films break even. Some turn a profit. Many don't. Many are done on a charitable basis. But, the prospects for vegan activism, like PCRM is not going to turn a profit ever. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, is not going to turn a profit ever. So all of this rests on that donor-driven basis. So sure, there's the hope that the proliferation of vegan bacon and vegan milk substitutes and vegan cheese, that it'll create a material basis for like I say, the proliferation of 2-3 many PCRMs, many legal challenges, many of those democratic agencies.
The big donors, are they like private people, private entities, or are they big organizations, companies like Ford Foundation type places? Do you see
the Ford Foundation. Ford Foundation has come up many times in my life. I've lived a strange life. So that's a good question, and you're right. They are highly eccentric multimillionaires. So I've pointed this out repeatedly in my videos. But so Gary Yourofsky, who was a big deal 5 years ago and now isn't. Gary Yourofsky was the most vocal, best-known voice in vegan activism about 5 years ago. Yourofsky. Gary Yourofsky. And you can search within my channel. I have a playlist of videos in which I'm criticizing him. He was an obscure part-time substitute teacher in Detroit, Michigan, United States. And to all reports, he was living in poverty, which I can believe. Even if you're rich in Detroit, you live in poverty. It's pretty rough town. It's pretty awful. But anyway, as a supply teacher in Detroit, I have no reason to think he was affluent in any way. Probably had a pretty tough life. And he was putting all of his time and effort into vegan activism on this basis, out of his garage, so to speak. And one, multimillionaire, the former guitarist for the rock band Queen. So you're old enough, you can probably remember when Queen was a really big deal. Of course. So, but the guy is, apparently, I've looked it up, he is incredibly wealthy, this musician. He's, some musicians are broke, but he's not one of them. He personally met this guy and selected him and started putting money behind him. And then what do you know? He's going on world tour and he's becoming this high profile figure and he's doing interviews with the mainstream news and so on. So something like that might seem, in the slang parlance of our time, might seem organic. It might seem grassroots. It's not. It's very much the product of one donor's intervention. So I have been told that about other vegan groups and individuals who've emerged from obscurity. The crucial first step for Wayne Seung, for Direct Action Everywhere, was, and again, I've been told this by many sources, and there is some verifiable evidence for it, with the donations they received from Ingrid Newkirk. Ingrid Newkirk, who is the founder of PETA. I do not know if the money came from her personal bank account or if it was funding directly from PETA, like from agency to agency. I suspect the latter, that it was actually PETA giving them the startup money to do what they're doing. So yeah, ultimately, in these countries we're talking about, activism is about money. It doesn't exist without donations, or it's invisible without donation. It can be one man standing on the sidewalk with pamphlets, but you don't get above that in terms of organization or impact. Now, it is different in a Muslim society. It is different in a Buddhist society. The structure and function of charity is very different if you're in some other society. But definitely in the United States and Canada, the only prospect we have for building institution and building community in veganism is going to be donation-driven. The big exceptions being for-profit food industry and someone like you. If you get out there and say, hey, I want to make a movie that has the best aspects of Star Wars and the best aspects of Game of Thrones and the best aspects of Dune, and, here it is, here's my project, and the moral of the story, maybe at several points or on several levels, actually does relate to veganism or does relate to the fact that animals suffer the same way humans do or something. There's something you're getting across, in this script or in this story, but this really has the ability to make money. Whatever. It's starring Natalie Portman. I don't care. Whatever it is. That's also different because then you're taking it out of that donor-driven loop. Yeah. So no, I'm not optimistic. And, talent is really, really thin on the ground. There are not a lot of talent now, because now I've been doing this. I mean, I've been blessed. I haven't been tied down with a full-time job. I've really been shaking hands and talking to people and reaching out to people so intensively in the last 5 years.
Is the patron thing working for you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it works, but it's not, in a sense, it's not what I was hoping it would be. Because I was really hoping that Patreon could be a crossroads where I meet and get organized with other activists. That was really what I was hoping, was to create a little, network of people I would actually do things with. But anyway, but frankly, some of that is my fault. My message is not appealing to that many people. People find me intellectually intimidating and don't want to work with me.
I guess my last question is, I'm surprised that the Eds and Waynes, because if it was me,
right,
I'd want to hear what you had to say, talk to you, be
right,
friendly with you, to be, let's talk it out. Let's figure out,
right.
Because if the end goal is really the end goal,
right?
Let's be practical and analytical, and be like Monsanto. They're not trying to make friends. They're trying to
right.
They don't care.
They're trying to win.
Whatever.
Play to win.
They don't care how to do it, but they're not going to leave any stone unturned.
Yep.
So I'm surprised that would be a thing, but I guess you get into some human sort of issues.
I agree, yeah, and it is disappointing. And I was talking to someone who was an organizer for Cube of Truth. So Cube of Truth is also known as Anonymous for the Voiceless. Right. So he was like a regional director, and so not the very, very top level, but still. And I was saying to him, look, you can't run an organization like a high school clique. Like, this can't just be about who's friends with who, or who's sleeping with who, or who's cool or who's not. Right. Like, there's got to, like, I don't care what the principles are. And I remember he said to me, this is almost a verbatim quote. He said, no, it never ends. Everything is like a high school clique. It's like, well, look, I do have experience in other walks of life, and not all vegans do. Not all vegans have kind of experience. I know what it's like to sit down at a boardroom meeting and present research and findings to representatives of corporations and large charities and government agencies, and chair a meeting and do this kind of stuff. Most left wingers especially look down on corporations as evil. Look down on corporations as evil. But you can actually learn a lot in terms of good corporate practices and how to, as you say, even Monsanto, they cooperate, they play well with others because they're playing to win. A lot of those attitudes definitely are missing. But look, the flip side is that the internet gives us a false sense of place. And I was talking to another activist. I can name him. I don't think it does any harm. His first name is Ali. His name's Ali Tabrizi, and he is now, like yourself, a documentary filmmaker. So, like, right now, he's finishing his first big professional documentary film. So he's off the internet, but when that launches, he'll do press releases and stuff for it. But anyway, Ali Tabrizi, when I was talking to him, within his first year of being an activist on YouTube, he was organizing events with more than 200 people. So, like, 200 people, I think 300, 400 people. He had all this positive support at all levels from individuals and institutions and groups, and he would throw an event and have people show up to it. And I do not. I mean, after 5 years, the message I'm delivering, and I know what I've done that's made me unpopular. I'm honest about things like, castrating dogs and declawing cats and killing cockroaches. I would never do, so to come back to Gary Yourofsky, I would never do what Gary Yourofsky does and lie to you, claiming that I never kill cockroaches. I actually do think it's immoral to kill a cockroach. I think you're still killing an animal, but I do it, and I'm willing to be honest about that. And if you live in Cambodia, if you live in the tropics, killing cockroaches is part of your life. Okay. Yeah, the New York winter is never cold enough to wipe out the hardy American cockroach. It's amazing. It's cold. So, I just say, but my honesty about all that stuff, alienated me. But the point I was just making is it's easy to lose track of the sense of place and feel like I'm on the internet, therefore I'm everywhere, and you're not. The difference between me and Ali Tabrizi was that he was in downtown London, England, and London, England has 200 years of animal rights activism, proto-veganism and then veganism. That is really where veganism began. They have the oldest, deepest tradition, and it's also a huge city in terms of population. And I have not been in London, England. So apart from all those other factors, ultimately, where you are, who you meet face to face, those still are the real prerequisites. And it probably is for filmmaking too. That's probably why you need to live in New York and why you can't do filmmaking in Schenectady or something, Yeah.
Right. At least at the beginning, yeah. It's almost impossible to not be in LA or New York.
Right.
To really have those connections.
Right.
All right.
So politics is even more so, right? Politics is even more so. Great.
Yeah. Well, this is a really amazing sort of introspective primer on this, so I really appreciate this. It's very helpful.
It's also cool for me to hear. I mean, it sounds like you've really got interested in this in the past 1 year. So it'll be...
for 20 years,
I understand,
it's
yeah.
obvious.
Right.
And then I was like, I really had to, press myself, like, I guess most vegetarians who become vegan is like, you're kind of lying to yourself.
Right.
And then you have to just be like, I know I love cheese, it's just not worth it.
Right.
And so and once you make that, once you look at it directly, it's hard to not do it.
Right.
So, and then beyond, I want to still be as objective as possible, looking into this as any, researcher would. What is happening? How does it work? Good, bad, ugly. Let's dive in. So that's kind of where I'm at.
But my point is, I mean, I would be really interested to hear where you're at 1 year from now. Maybe it's only going to be 6 months from now, but I would like to hear back from what you're doing. And, in the old days, whenever I did these interviews, I'm not going to ask you now because I think you're just putting your plans together. I used to always ask other activists, what are you planning for the next 5 years? What do you think is going to happen with you and the movement in the next 5 years? And again, I was talking to people of all ages. I can't just say these were young people. Some of them were 21, but some of them were 35. And almost all of them were shocked by the question. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean 5 years? And I got an email. I got an email from one of them a couple months ago, and he said, "Wow, you know what? You asked me that, and now it's 4 years later." And now I look back at that and I really think, wow, what if I had a 5-year plan? Because these kinds of questions, they're not going to disappear for us.
Yeah, well, you need to have some sort of blueprint, even if it changes.
Right.
It's like going into battle. Like you have to have some sort of plan, even though you throw it out the window as soon as you get in there, or otherwise you're just going in circles. So. I do some sort of plan, and that's trying to. Well, first for me, it's being as knowledgeable as possible first.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out, when I'm ready, because I did a documentary that took me 5 years plus to make.
Right.
And you got to be all in, and until I'm not ready to be all in until I'm somewhat certain that it's worth.
But I point out these other people in the game. I don't think Leonardo DiCaprio has a 5-year plan. I don't think Natalie Portman has a 5-year plan.
Right.
There are a lot of people who are not even thinking in those terms. I think the people with a 5-year plan are people like PCRM. Those are the people who are really looking to make a difference in the next 5 years. And one of the first steps they take is narrowing their focus and limiting their ambitions to the difference they can make in the next 5 years. They can't take on everything.
Just philosophically for me, while I do think government plays a big role in this, you can't wait for government to do anything. You can't trust the government to do anything. It needs to be people showing the market what's important to them, and money talks.
Right.
And Coca-Cola will stop selling Coke tomorrow if you stop buying it.
Right.
They'll figure out something else to sell you, even though they own a million other drinks. But and so we're talking about 10, 20, 30 years. If you're going to be honest, you got to look at land use, energy, water, all that is wrapped up in animals. So you just have to look at it and just figure out a way in. So the smartest people, the people with money, something clicks. Like, why did it click for me and not for someone else? I didn't like meat any less than you or whoever I'm talking to. So why for me? I'm like, obviously not. But they're like, no. So that's really what I'm trying to find out is why. When you say people don't care, which they don't,
right?
Why do I? I'm not special, right?
Yeah.
And So that's what I'm trying to do.
It may be that when you come to the end of this research you're doing, your final conclusion is that you are special.
Maybe.
And you maybe start to feel comfortable with that specialness. Because, when I moved to Cambodia, I was there to do humanitarian work. I was there to do research. I was there to make the world a better place. I was already, as I say, strictly vegetarian. I was like 98% vegan, but I wasn't 100% vegan. So, I'm living this kind of strangely self-disciplined life. Guess who I'm meeting every day? I'm meeting the white people who are there as sex tourists. Like, I'm meeting people. Cambodia has no extradition treaties, or they didn't then with any Western. But you're meeting people there who are literally murderers. There was one guy, I never met him, but he was literally an axe murderer. He had killed someone with an axe who was living there. So you're meeting kind of in contrast to, yourself and, the couple people I knew in the humanitarian field who may be there with these very pious motives. You're meeting the worst of the worst. Oh, and the Christian missionaries, of course. The people who are there to convert Buddhists to Christianity. You're meeting these astoundingly immoral people. So, I think I do have a very pragmatic, down-to-earth, sense of ethics. But I think part of that, maybe in the course of the research you're doing now, you're going to have to admit to yourself that you are, in some way, a special person. And of the other people, I would just say the other people who are at the same airport with you in Cambodia, or who are even at the same event with you when you're involved in veganism, or at the same conference, you're maybe going to start to get a feeling for what those ethical differences really are. Yeah,
I agree. And what's the other interesting thing, and I'd be curious to have your take on this, is one of the myths I think in America for sure is that veganism is for white hipster,
right,
liberal, whatever, and I
right,
think that certainly is not true.
Right.
I just went to a massive, that Vegan Dale, big food festival.
Right.
I think there's one in Toronto, and it's in Randall's Island, New York. I mean, a massive food festival, and I would say it was 50% African American people from various social class structures, and I would say in the inner cities in Harlem, Compton, there's vegan soul food restaurants. There's anyone. It doesn't matter how rich or smart you are on some level. As soon as you're cued into it, it doesn't matter who you are. Even if you don't have a lot of money, you're like, I'm not torturing animals.
Yeah. In Detroit, it was about 50-50 when we were in vegan restaurants. A lot of the vegan restaurants, about 50% of the guests would be black, and also about 50% of the staff at a lot of them.
Right.
So, and some of them were black owned and celebrated as such. But there's a big African American interest in veganism in Detroit and Chicago and in other places. But look, all of it is dwarfed by China and Taiwan. I mean, you don't even have to get into India. I mean, India, it's a bit of a question mark which way India is going to go on veganism. But Buddhism is the sleeping giant. Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism behind veganism, and the potential of even something like Judaism, because Israel and Tel Aviv specifically, Israel has become massively vegan, and there's really no basis for veganism in Judaism. There's a very vague intellectual tradition or concern. You can try to characterize that as being the basis for why so many Jewish people became vegan, but it's not as if they're quoting the Bible or something. It's, if anything, it's probably because they're disillusioned with the Bible that they get interested in veganism. But no, so I mean, these there are big sources of non-Western and non-white impetus behind veganism. However, PCRM, take a look right now. What ethnicity is PCRM? What, even PETA, people with ethical treatment of animals. So, there's no doubt that the established and moneyed elites are the ones who are actually setting up and running the few organizations we've got. There's not a lot to talk about. And that comes back to donor-driven activism, which is what I've been saying. That if I start my own organization like that, who do you think I'm doing fundraising for? 21-year-old edgy vegans? No, it's people over 65. It's people who are retired and you have a certain amount of their income they're giving to charity every year, and you're trying to make the pitch to them. So that's where the disconnect is. And obviously, I think you just have to have a realistic attitude towards that. I mean, ultimately, like if you want a specialized vegan charity, like let's say I set up, I'd love to do this. I'd love to set up a specialized vegan charity just dealing with elephants, but it's a vegan charity helping elephants. I have a fair bit of experience with elephants from my years in Southeast Asia. Nobody is really going to care. Nobody's going to support you or not support you because of your gender, ethnicity, etc. If what they care about is elephants. So in that way, also specialization is a way out of the identity politics an ethno-socioeconomic, bind of our time to say, hey, look, this is what we're really great at. What we're great at is water pollution or elephants or, specifically challenging school boards about propaganda that says milk and eggs are okay. This is what we're great at, so the color of our skin shouldn't be what we're judged by. I think that's what all of us can hope to do, regardless of what color of skin it is you were born into. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, we're past 1 hour.
Give me the time.
No, well, thank you. And as I say, look, don't act like it's hard to find me. I've certainly got an eventful year coming up. I think I'm moving back to Taiwan. We're really preparing for that. But I'd be really interested to hear. You're at the kind of fact-finding stage. But please do keep in touch. I'll be really interested to hear what the next steps are that you take.
We'll definitely keep you up to date, and I'm sure I'll have some other questions along the way. And I appreciate you giving me the time.
Great.
It's really, really, really helpful.
Thanks for calling. Bye-bye.